Excellency, Mr. Patrick Ashi, Head of the Government of Cote d'Ivoire, dear Senior Minister for Agriculture and Rural Development, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Government of Cote d'Ivoire, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, DGs, CEOs and heads of public administrations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Allow me to bid you welcome to the country of hospitality, a country of real opportunity. With its modern infrastructures and promising projects, Cote d'Ivoire, which is fully in development, is opening its doors to you, where you have more investment opportunities, and these are diversified and numerous. You need to get a hold of them before you can grab them, and of course, you will be given the chance to get a deep dive into all the business opportunities. And this is the purpose of this meeting, which is an excellent platform for the private sector to explore and contribute to the development of this sector, which is viewed as the driver for the structural development of the economy of Cote d'Ivoire. Thanks and welcome to all of you to this ACF 2023 happening at the sidelines of the another events being held at this hotel. For this meeting, we'll have first a film on the attractiveness of Cote d'Ivoire, and next the speech by the Prime Minister, heads of the government of Cote d'Ivoire. And this will be made up of testimonies of investors from private sector, investing in priority sectors. And next will be a panel where you have the chance to discuss the topics, and the panel members, as well as a moderator who will be replacing me later. And this will be wrapped up by the speech by the Minister for Industry and SME Promotion, to be followed by the signing of the MOUs. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the epitome of this meeting, and with your permission, let's go for the film which shows all the opportunities in Cote d'Ivoire. And this is delivered by CPC.
Côte d'Ivoire, terre d'investissement. La Côte d'Ivoire est une terre riche. Riche de ses plus de 29 millions d'hommes et de femmes. Riche de son capital humain de qualité. Riche de son hospitalité légendaire. Riche de sa diversité culturelle. Forte d'une croissance économique de 7% en 2021, la Côte d'Ivoire contribue à hauteur de 40% du PIB de l'Union économique et monétaire ouest-africain UEMOA, avec un volume commercial extérieur de 35%. Une prospérité bâtie sur ses 322 462 km² avec 60% de terres entièrement arables. Le pays est un creuset d'opportunités avec des ressources naturelles abondantes et disponibles à des coûts compétitifs. La Côte d'Ivoire offre des opportunités dans de nombreux secteurs, dont la production et la transformation minière et agricole, les industries manufacturières, le tourisme, la santé, le transport. Par ses remarquables performances économiques, la Côte d'Ivoire ambitionne d'accélérer sa transformation économique et sociale et de se hisser à l'horizon 2030 au rang des pays à revenus intermédiaires de la tranche supérieure. La réalisation de cette vision passe par le développement des secteurs prioritaires et des grappes industrielles définies dans le Plan national de développement PND 2021-2025. L'agro-industrie, l'industrie chimique, les matériaux de construction, la pharmacie, le textile, l'automobile, l'emballage, ainsi que des nouvelles niches. L'économie digitale, le tourisme et les industries créatives qui élargissent davantage les perspectives. La Côte d'Ivoire est une nation qui se réinvente continuellement dans un monde en constante mutation. Terre d'investissement, la Côte d'Ivoire s'est dotée d'infrastructures modernes et d'un écosystème favorable aux affaires. Les réformes entreprises pour améliorer le climat des affaires ont permis de renforcer la bonne gouvernance, la transparence de l'action publique, l'équité du genre et le développement d'investissements durables et responsables. Ces réformes institutionnelles et structurelles ont permis l'amélioration des services aux investisseurs à travers la mise en place de guichets uniques, la simplification et la digitalisation des procédures. Des régimes de zones franches et de zones économiques spéciales, des codes sectoriels ainsi qu'un code des investissements octroyant des incitations fiscales et douanières attractives ont été institués en vue d'améliorer la rentabilité des investissements en Côte d'Ivoire. Investir en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est s'ouvrir à un marché de 410 millions de consommateurs à l'échelle de la communauté économique des États de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, CEDEAO, et accéder à celui de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, ZLECAf, estimé à plus de 1,2 milliard de consommateurs. Guichet unique de l'investissement, le CPC fédère, coordonne et rationalise l'ensemble des initiatives et actions gouvernementales en matière de promotion des investissements et de développement du secteur privé. Porte d'entrée de l'investisseur en Côte d'Ivoire, le CPC accompagne les investisseurs dans la réalisation des projets d'investissement. Investisseurs, la Côte d'Ivoire vous ouvre ses bras. Pariez sur un nouvel élan économique et contribuez au développement durable d'une Côte d'Ivoire solidaire. Aquaba, bienvenue en Côte d'Ivoire. CPC, le guichet unique de l'investissement en Côte d'Ivoire.
A very nice motion picture delivered by CPC, the single window for investment in Cote d'Ivoire. Ladies and gentlemen, the economic and social transformation of Cote d'Ivoire is a daily concern. Now, please welcome His Excellency Patrick Achi, Prime Minister and Head of the Government of Cote d'Ivoire, with your standing ovations, please. Honorable Senior Minister for Agriculture and Rural Development, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, excellencies, ambassadors, members of the diplomatic corps, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of institutions, ladies and gentlemen, President and DGs, ladies and gentlemen, investors from the local and international level, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, just a decade over the establishment of the government of Cote d'Ivoire, led by Alassane Ouattara, Cote d'Ivoire is back to the center of the game. And this is being said without talking about the next development plan for 2023. This country is back as a major actor of which values, voice, and projects are listened to across the continent, and it has recently contributed to the development of the region just a decade ago. And I'm happy to see here the large turnout of CEOs and investors, which illustrates of your confidence in the development of the economy of Cote d'Ivoire. And this shows how happy I am to address you today on the occasion of this business event centered on investing in Cote d'Ivoire. I would like to address to each and every one of you the warm welcome, which is Aquaba. And I would like to extend my gratitude for the interest and vote of confidence in my country and your decision to support it through your investment. For 10 years now, Cote d'Ivoire had stayed the course, and we will maintain this. Believe it, it is not just by chance if after an average growth of 7% for the period 2012-2019, despite the various challenges, Cote d'Ivoire has been able to maintain a growth rate of 2% in 2020 and a rise by 4% in 2021 and maintain the growth at 6.2 in 2022. The forecastings for this year are centered on a growth rate that will be double of the African average. And this illustrates of the robustness of our plans and the extraordinary potential to create value and wealth. And it also illustrates of the deepness of our reforms. Indeed, major structural and sectoral reforms intended to improve the business environment and make larger room for Cote d'Ivoire as one of the major drivers of the African economies were implemented, which was welcomed by both the national and private investors in particular. And in terms of reform, this dynamism is outlined in the development plan for 2021-2025, in line with the trajectory designed by the President of Cote d'Ivoire for a more prosperous and solidarity country. Ladies and gentlemen, governing is to plan, as mentioned by Pierre Mendes. In these times of unpredicted events, our sole option is to fast-track the strong construction plans by anticipating anything that can be anticipated and creating the resilience that is needed for anything that cannot be predicted. And this forms part of the ambition of the President under the 2021-2025 plans. And our ambition for 2030 are clear, which is to make Cote d'Ivoire form part of the countries with the middle income. And this ambition is centered on three structuring objectives: doubling the per capita income over 10 years, create 8,000 jobs by 2030 to integrate the large number of young people, which is teeming with energy in the life strata, and also lower poverty rate by bringing it to 20%, and finally increase life expectancy by 10 years to turn Cote d'Ivoire into a country where you live well and grow old well. And to achieve this, there's a need to tackle two challenges that are connected. First, promoting a development that is larger and massive of the private sector, both at the domestic and international level, to turn it into the key driver of our growth. And on another hand, to further improve governance and modernize administration to turn it into a key and effective partner for the successful transformation of the private sector. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where Cote d'Ivoire needs you, and that you also need it under its in the light of its tremendous potential. Ladies and gentlemen, the private sector is already a structural driver for investment in our country, since it accounts for 50% of the total investments. However, to support the 2030 ambitions, we need to take it to a step further. And this is why the government is committed to is committed to turn the business environment more attractive via a number of schemes intended to promote foreign investments. The government is also committed to develop robust credit institutions to make private investments to be increased by 30% on the horizon of 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, this is to be achieved, and it cannot happen without ensuring the transformation of our economy. And we have all that it takes to take up this challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, the talk with the Prime Minister of Morocco, we mentioned the need to make agribusiness more sustainable. And we are aware that in the end, Africa is the continent that will be feeding the entire world, because it has more than 2/3 of the Arab land, which is yet untapped. The transformation of our agriculture is the pillar of our national development plan, ensuring food sovereignty and processing our product here at the domestic level instead of exporting the raw material. This is the key objective. We can no longer rely on the external world while settling for importing commodities, because tomorrow we cannot just be a mere importer. And we have an ecosystem that is more vibrant and more appropriate for investments, specifically in the area of housing. And we are all aware that our population is young, and over a period of 10 years, it's been double. And today, nearly 52% of the Ivorians, that is 15% of the population, live in the cities, making Cote d'Ivoire the most urbanized country on the continent. We have integrated in our policies this fast urbanization trend, and we have an ambitious policy to develop secondary cities. On top of Abidjan, we want to create regional metropoles, including Boaké, Korogo, San Pedro, and Daloa, to mention the few. And this has to be well planned and form part of the infrastructure development and core service improvement for the benefit of health. And the same is true for innovating services to be provided to our countrymen living in the urban areas. And also, the area of tourism is a source of wealth creation and also facilitate sustainable development. And these are all parts of the sectors that we keep growing over the coming years. You need to be interested in this and play a key role in this change. And we also have the telcos and digital sector, which is impactful, accounting for 5% of the GDP, on top of a dozen of other priority sectors where we also have a lot of comparative advantages. There are many needs where national champions can emerge and where foreign investments have to be centered. And this includes the textile industries, the pharmacies, housing, energy, and the small-scale mechanization, infrastructures, transport, mining, and cultural industries in this globalized world and hit by colors and vitality of African creations. A transforming project portfolio will be presented to you shortly as part of the daily home for today. And I'm sure that this will attract you in the light of their ambition and formidable potential that they have. Ladies and gentlemen, you have understood that Cote d'Ivoire is in motion as a giant, and tomorrow, it is my conviction, it will be fast-tracked thanks to your audacity, commitment, investment. And tomorrow, with your input, we will surely consolidate our ambition, which is to become this major hub at the center of this African continent, at the center of the major globe offers. And Cote d'Ivoire will continue to project itself at the speed that is required for revolution. And we have all that it takes to say that it is possible. Our National Development Plan will be the tool as led by the insights of the President of the Republic, His Excellency Alassane Ouattara. And we want to get to that level with the input of audacious and ambitious entrepreneurs and investors who are aware that the biggest success are built over time and who can get committed on the long term to develop win-win agreements, and who would like to join a movement that will mark the social and human development of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, dear investors, please join us. Join us to turn our Cote d'Ivoire into a nation of hospitality, a land of modernity, creativity and opportunity, as well as solidarity. Long live to Cote d'Ivoire and long live to the new African continent. Thanks for your kind attention.
Imaginez un pays joyeux. Imaginez un joyau éclatant, niché dans le creuset de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Un miracle façonné par le temps et la terre. Une symphonie de vie et de couleurs. C'est la Côte d'Ivoire. Ici, les montagnes chuchotent au vent leurs histoires ancestrales. Les forêts luxuriantes murmurent le rire de la faune sauvage. Les plages dorées écoutent les secrets des vagues de l'Atlantique. Ici, la beauté et l'hospitalité sont un langage couramment parlé. C'est l'hymne chanté par chaque feuille, chaque grain de sable, chaque sourire d'un peuple fier et résilient. Bienvenue en Côte d'Ivoire. Dans le ventre nourricier de la Côte d'Ivoire, les hommes et les femmes s'éveillent avec le soleil. Leurs mains forgées par la terre et le travail. Chaque graine semée est une promesse à la terre. Chaque récolte, un pacte avec l'avenir. Ils sont les gardiens de la sécurité alimentaire, non seulement de leur nation, mais aussi du monde entier. Ils œuvrent avec une détermination farouche, embrassant une production responsable, durable.
En investissant dans la sécurité alimentaire, vous contribuez à la croissance économique, à la lutte contre la faim et à la création d'emplois durables dans le secteur agricole.
En parlant de durabilité, chaque arbre planté, chaque source préservée, chaque énergie renouvelable exploitée témoigne de leur promesse à la nature. Ils cultivent l'innovation comme on cultive un champ, avec respect, patience et espoir. Car pour eux, l'énergie n'est pas seulement une nécessité, c'est un pacte avec la terre, une chance d'offrir un avenir plus vert et plus lumineux.
Suivez l'exemple de Plastica, venez investir en Côte d'Ivoire pour y développer les pratiques chères au développement durable.
Ici, en Côte d'Ivoire, les contours de l'urbanisation dessinent le visage du futur. Les villes s'élèvent, audacieuses et modernes, modelant des paysages d'acier et de verre en réponse à l'appel d'une population florissante. Chaque nouvelle infrastructure est un hommage à la croissance, une promesse de progrès.
Aujourd'hui, les étoiles sont alignées pour l'optimisation des rendements des investissements en Côte d'Ivoire.
L'élan économique actuel que connaît la Côte d'Ivoire accélère l'urbanisation et attise la très forte demande en logement.
C'est pour cette raison, s'il y a un secteur dans lequel il faut investir en Côte d'Ivoire, c'est le secteur immobilier.
Sur la scène brillante de la Côte d'Ivoire, le tourisme et la créativité dansent une valse colorée. Ils alimentent l'économie, la diversifient, la transforment et ils font briller le riche patrimoine culturel du pays, tel un phare guidant les curieux.
Un des principaux atouts de l'investissement touristique en Côte d'Ivoire, ce sont les infrastructures. Le deuxième atout, c'est le biotope exceptionnel que nous avons en Côte d'Ivoire. Et nous pouvons passer de la mer du Sud aux savanes du Nord en traversant les montagnes de l'Ouest. Cela fait de la Côte d'Ivoire un endroit exceptionnel.
La Côte d'Ivoire, une terre d'opportunités et de défis, appelle à l'investissement audacieux. Son énergie, son innovation, son ambition sont le sol fertile pour semer les graines du futur. Rejoignez-nous, investissez dans cette perle de l'Afrique de l'Ouest et ensemble, façonnons son avenir radieux.
Gentlemen, before turning to the panel, let us welcome Mr. Guido Rushko, the CCOO Natural Resources for ENI. Put hands together for him, please.
Thank you and very good morning to all. And first, let me express my pleasure to be here. It's my third time and I always come with a great pleasure in Abidjan for the CEO Forum. And I wish to express also my sincere gratitude to the government of Cote d'Ivoire and specifically to His Excellency Patrick Achi, the Prime Minister, and also our Supervising Minister, Mamadou Coulibaly, Minister of Mines, Energy and Petroleum. And I extend my greetings to all the ministers, diplomats, and distinguished guests today. In my brief address, I'd like to emphasized the importance to establish a robust and tangible alliance between investing company and hosting countries. And let me be clear from the very beginning. In Ivory Coast, we recognized an attractive legislative, regulatory, and contractual framework that creates favorable conditions for investors. And I'll make this with a concrete and tangible example that makes me and all our team, ENI team in the country, very, very proud. And I'm talking about the solid and tangible collaboration between ENI and Cote d'Ivoire, which has led to the giant discovery of Baleine field in 2021. Eni came back in Ivory Coast in 2015 after being very active in the 60s and in the 80s. And we came back because we shared a common strategic and constructive and concrete dialogue with Ivorian institutions and partners. And since the discovery of Baleine in September 2021, with all the parties involved, we are actively working to bring this field in production mid-2023, very close to now. And this is a record time, and it wouldn't be possible with the collaboration of the hosting country and all the institutions and all the local contractors that have been working with us. And we are very close, Minister and Prime Minister, to the finish line. And Baleine is a huge reward. It's a huge reward because it provides to the country a new perspective for oil and gas exploration. And will contribute to the industrial development of Cote d'Ivoire, underpinning its economic growth for years to come, and fostering social and economic development. Baleine associated gas will feed the domestic demand, ensuring access to energy to millions of people and allowing the development of Ivory Coast as a regional energy hub for the region. And in fact, all the associated gas produced from Baleine will go to the domestic market and will represent at regime more than 50% of the current production. But at the same time, we are also looking to the energy transition, and the project is fully in line with our shared idea of a just transition, which balance the right to develop the economy with the need to reduce emission. And the decarbonization is at the very heart of Baleine development since its very beginning. So Baleine is the first net zero project on scope 1 and 2 in Africa. And the scope 1 and 2 are the emission links to the production of the hydrocarbon. How we did that? Just 3 months after the discovery, we signed an MOU with the Minister of Mines, Petroleum and Energy to reach what we call it the carbon neutrality. And we did it with 2 sets of activity. The first one was to an extensive distribution of improved cookstoves, which has the dual objective of improving the access to the energy and reducing deforestation and emissions. And additionally, the cookstoves are manufactured in the country, therefore having a direct impact on the local economy. And the distribution has started in June 2022 with a target to distribute 300,000 cookstoves over the next 7 years, reaching more than 1 million of beneficiaries. In addition to that, we also agreed with the Minister of Waters and Forests to look into RED Plus project and other natural climate solutions over an area of 380,000 hectares. And we expect to start this, the first project by the end of the year. So combining all these activities will allow to offset over the entire full life the CO2 emissions of the project. But we see room also for a broader cooperation on the sustainable mobility value chain. So we are now looking on how to use the waste of the agricultural supply chain to be pressed into vegetable oil and produce biofuels for heavy trucks and airplanes. And you may have heard that just a week or so ago, we fueled the first airplane in Africa with biofuel. And so we would look to do the same in the shortest possible time also in Ivory Coast. We have a plan to produce vegetable oil right this year with further plan to expand in the forthcoming year. And this is a business which is based on a long-term commitment, will create new and stable work opportunities all along the supply chain. But to do all of this, we shall not forget to foster development for the human capital and provide quality education for our business and other business associated to our business. We are helping the country to requalify schools, more than 20 primary schools in Abidjan and South Comore, which will address a better education for more than 8,000 students. And we are promoting quality masters with the Institut National Polytechnique, targeting more than 300 masters in the next 3 years. So all these initiatives will increase access to energy, support the economy, support the education, the health, create new jobs, new business, but also reducing emissions and minimizing the environmental impact. And this is what we called the just transition. So let me conclude by saying that all this activity we are working testify how much ENI and Ivorian authorities and partners are looking in the same direction with a common strategic view. A vision that goes far, far beyond developing a major oil and gas project standalone, but sets a starting point for a sustainable and lasting value creation in Ivory Coast on the path towards the energy transition. Thank you to all for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you, sir, for this keynote address. Now, Your Excellency, for your consent, we will turn to the panel, and the topic is the challenges in the transformation of the Ivorian economy through the implementation of the National Development Plan 2021-2025, opportunities for the private sector. The moderator will be Mr. Chairman of Acha. Over to you. Please convene all the panelists to this high table. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, Your Excellencies, dear ministers, dear CEOs, dear guests. We are lagging far behind, so I would like to convey and invite all the panelists to join me on this stage, starting with His Excellency, the Minister of Economy and Finance. Mr. Minister, please. Put hands together for him, please. Your Excellency, Madam the Minister of Culture and Francophonie, and the Regional Director for IFC in West Africa, Senior VP for Holam,
the General Director of
General
Gurney, and last but not least, founder and CEO of Groupe Cofina, Jean-Luc Conan. Jean-Luc. On va commencer immédiatement. Donc, je vais commencer avec vous, Monsieur le Ministre.
Let us make a start right now. Mr. Minister of Economy and Finance, the Prime Minister discussed the growth aspects of growth over the last decades, and it is a great accelerator over the last decade. Now, can you discuss the macroeconomic framework of Cote d'Ivoire? What are the opportunities for investors, and what kind of drivers have you developed in order to attract more investors? Thank you. Let me acknowledge all the participants to this meeting and the investors for the valuable presence to this panel. It is true that the Prime Minister just indicated in his address that he mentioned the economic performances of Cote d'Ivoire. He recalled the growth trajectory, and I would like to indicate that Cote d'Ivoire has a high economic profile. Indeed, economic growth was mentioned over the period 2018-2019. The average growth was 8%. In 2020, as you know, the Prime Minister mentioned it, just 2% that we recorded. This is commendable since we experienced a global recession. The rate was minus 2.8%, and we observe a growth in 2021 at 7%, and then we experience other crises, namely the crisis in Ukraine and also the hardening of funding conditions. So at the global level, this is a reality. It is a reality, sorry, and we were impacted in Cote d'Ivoire. Despite this situation in 2022, our growth rate is 6%. In terms of forecasts for 2023-2025, we think that it will be 7%. This is for growth, and it is not enough to show that we have a strong macroeconomic framework. We also have inflation that is a real problem. We have an inflation rate that is under control under the community standard, which is 2% over the period, so there is no problem relating to inflation in Cote d'Ivoire before the crisis that we all experienced from 2020, 2021, 2022. And just after that, we have also the issue of budget deficit. We have a real control over a budget deficit up to 2019. But it was 2.9% in 2019. But with all that we experienced as various crisis, the deficit was larger, but we are committing ourselves in order to come back to the community standard, which is 3%. So our debt is under control today. It is at moderate rates. Just to say that our macroeconomic framework is strong and our economic performance is one of the best at global level. How did we make it? It is just about some important reforms that were made over more than a decade, contributed to having some strong drivers in Cote d'Ivoire. This is what allows us to achieve it, to make it now. Which reforms were implemented? It is just as part of a different national development plan that were developed. They stressed the key role of the private sector. And if you remember, for the first one, the private sector was present and covered 60%. It covered the period from 2018-2015. The second national development plan was over 2016-2020 with an increase in this rate, which is 63%. The current one, with this one, we have 75% for the private sector. Just to say that the private sector is a real driver for our development. Saying that it is a driver, we need to put in place some conditions to attract it. Hence, all the reforms that we develop as part of the doing business, I think that the movie was telling all the single windows that we developed, we established for external trade, just to fix all the issues related to external trade and also building permits, so that construction permits for all the investors who want to come here can have a permit and also perform the investments on the land that want to build houses. In addition to that, there is an investment code that was developed in 2018, providing some possibilities in terms of taxes, and also targeting on the priority project and also the area of intervention. So we have all these possibilities that are offered as part of the investment code. But as part of the investment, as we are here with investors, I would like to discuss investors on the legal ground concerning the Court of Commerce. It is established to allow all the different businessmen to fix all the different complaints over a short period, which is 90 days, because traditional courts are full of cases. So these commercial courts allows to fix all the different issues over 90 days. It is a tool that protects investors and see how their cases can be fixed, whether they are right or not. So this is what I wanted to say concerning what we have done so far in terms of safety of this macroeconomic framework. Our economy is resilient, diversified, and we are still working on the business environment. It is a never-ending process because we are just trying to do like the others. It is a benchmark, so we should continue all the reforms. So up to now, I can say that our economy is ready to welcome investors. We are not yet at the end of a panel, but I would like investors to come here. It is right now that you should take the decision, because you can see that investors are coming. But if you take long, maybe you won't be alone. You don't find a room here. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Impressive performance at different levels. Now, let us discuss with investors now.
The impressive trajectory of the country over the past few years, over multiple dimensions. Tell us a bit about Olam and why did you invest in Cote d'Ivoire? What has been your experience? And maybe also some of the challenges you may have faced along the way.
Thank you, Ache. So firstly, just to remind the audience, Olam actually is a company that started off in Africa in 1989. And we've been present in Cote d'Ivoire since 1994. And initially, the company started off in the agricultural supply chain, and our primary objective was to source as close to the farm gate as possible and deliver at the factory gate of our customers. So our entire focus was building scale and providing market access and access to finance to primary aggregators, cooperatives, and farmers, which did not exist then. But since then, the story of Olam in Cote d'Ivoire is really tied into what Cote d'Ivoire as a country has gone through, transforming the agricultural sector. I think it's seen a boom over the last 20 years, and the last 10 years has really been about processing. And Olam invested in its first processing unit in 2004. We were the first to invest in cashew processing in the town of Dimbokro. Actually, it was the period when the country was in crisis. But we had always believed in the strong story of Cote d'Ivoire because of the strong the culture of growing crops that existed for a while. So since then, Olam has established the identity of cashew kernels, Ivorian cashew kernels globally, established Cote d'Ivoire as the largest supplier of organic cashews, then subsequently built factories in Boaké and Jekano and Tumodi, and more recently in Anyama. We also invested in the cotton sector in 2007. We started off with one cotton gin in Wongolo, subsequently another gin in Ferke, and we are currently building a third gin in Kong. And likewise, in cocoa, we started with investments in San Pedro with the first ultra-modern facility in 2014, followed by a subsequent acquisition of ADM's cocoa business and hence their factory in Abidjan. But what's really remarkable about our growth is it's really intertwined in the way Cote d'Ivoire has grown and transformed. So the biggest attractiveness that we found in Cote d'Ivoire all along has been the consistent growth in our value chains. And that has happened because of the government's relentless focus on farmer livelihoods, ensuring minimum farmer prices, and coming up with a very unique regulatory framework. We haven't seen the kind of interprofession structure that exists in Cote d'Ivoire anywhere else. It's a complete value chain approach where you have every participant of the value chain seated at the table with the relevant government officials, being able to discuss and debate issues. Of course, we always want more than what we get, but I think the government is very conscious of ensuring the attractiveness of every part of the value chain. And that keeps us going. And even now, even after all these facilities that we have set up, I still see significant headroom for growth. If we were to look at what more can be done, I think some of the other panelists earlier and during the morning session also had spoken about, I think there's a need for a significant investment in research and development. This has to fuel an improvement in productivity, whether it's farm productivity or factory productivity. And for that, there is a need for a lot of focus on upskilling human capital. I would think Cote d'Ivoire already has some of the best human capital that we have seen in the region. But given the growth, I think the speed at which this has to go has to be much faster. And then the country has to continue looking at competitiveness, productivity improvement, and removing inefficiencies in the various operations, aided by digitalization and use of modern technology. But I remain very, very optimistic. And right now, apart from what Olam does on our own in terms of investments, we're actively also pursuing partnerships. So we had talked, I think in the morning session, probably you also had mentioned about the focus on SMEs. And today we are looking at least having an equal part of our production coming from partnering local processors, providing them access to market, to finance, and to know-how. So we are quite optimistic.
Very good. Quite optimistic. I love it. Let's shift to another sector. Jean-Luc, on va parler de Cofina, dont tu as fondé l'entreprise. Vous avez commencé.
We are going to discuss Cofina. You established this in Guinea, Cote d'Ivoire. Now you are present in Cote d'Ivoire in 9 other countries. Comparing your experience in Cote d'Ivoire with the other countries where you are present. Yes, thank you. Thank you. We started outside Cote d'Ivoire when I was located in outside Cote d'Ivoire, but the headquarters was established here in Cote d'Ivoire, and it pilots all the activities in the sub-region. Why? I think that we discussed this in this panel because there was a conducive environmental framework that was there to trigger activities in Cote d'Ivoire. Today, Cote d'Ivoire is providing the main human capitals in the group. We also, for Cote d'Ivoire, but also we export in the other countries. We are present in 9 countries, 1,700 staff members. It is important to mention this, and with the human capital, even if we say that human capital index is under the one of sub-Saharan Africa, but I think that Cote d'Ivoire was providing more human resources. But in addition to that, we also have the framework that was conducive for business. In this framework, up to date, we're able to provide, let's say, more than 1,200 billion of loans. And we are present in the funding of SMEs. In addition to that, Cote d'Ivoire attracts us because for the first time over 1 century, we have the distribution of a Caterpillar network, and Cofina is taking over for the distribution of Caterpillar in these 9 countries, so that the license which was in Cote d'Ivoire is present here with all the different technical, financial, and human capacities. And all these skills allows us to grow within the sub-region. You can see all the different donors are supporting us in the conducive environment, and it was possible to mobilize all these resources. It is just this environment that attracted us. For sure, I'm at home, but it is easy. But when I take Cofina, and also the provision of licenses, it will go through the central bank. But today, Cote d'Ivoire is the first country in which the license is fastly delivered compared to the other 9 countries. So here we can see in which category we are and where we are going. To share some figures over the last 3 years in terms of funds, it is 150 billion CFA francs, and for Caterpillar it is more than 200 billion mobilized for the operations, and it is the very first time since that a distributor of that scale is from Sub-Saharan Africa, in French-speaking Sub-Saharan Africa. At the very beginning, it was from South Africa. Why did we succeed in make it? It is because we took advantage of the conducive environment. Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah, give it up for him. Thanks a lot. Well done for your expansion work in Caterpillar. What are the challenges you are facing currently? In terms of challenges, let's say this has been the easiest business environment because everything is smooth running for people like us who are dealing with clients that are exempted offshore. Cote d'Ivoire is the only country. It's not because we have the Prime Minister here that I'm saying that, but when we had any tax credit, it gets paid back to us directly via our accounts. This exists nowhere else than here. Sometimes we are asked to do compensations elsewhere, but this is the only country where we get such opportunities. So this made everything seamless for us. But now, the key challenge is this. We need to voice it out, because I'm not sure when I'll get such an opportunity to have a large turnout of ministers in a room. We have set up a global macroeconomic framework, which is quite conducive and made for sport athletes to become champions. And this is a framework that is open for everyone. We have all availed it. It remains operational regardless of where you are coming from. And when the champion has emerged, now, I don't want to say it but I need to. We need now to create a custom-made framework so that the champion can become a super champion, both at the regional and international level. Why? Because today, when you consider Cote d'Ivoire, 70 billion is twice the size of the next country. So we'll try to venture into other territories, and this calls for a more personalized or customized framework. And you know, when you become a champion, another person will come to you and tell you that even though they like this meal, you have to change it because you can't keep taking that meal all the time. I'm just giving out this picture to let you know that we need to continue to grow, because this illustrates the picture of our country. Great, that's fine, because you want to develop more champions, like to shift from domestic level to the regional and international level. Right, let's delve into the culture now, because we have talked about finance and agriculture. Madam Minister of Finance, we have noticed major investments in culture across the continent. What are the opportunities available in Cote d'Ivoire? I have come up with a small presentation, if this could be displayed. Yes, thanks a lot. In the light of a number of sectors, likewise other sectors such as tourism and industry, this forms part of the National Development Plan. I just want to rectify something. You know, this is an impactful sector, and is not well showcased as discussed by the Minister of Tourism earlier on. Why? The CEO of Biodeni has clearly, has well captured that, because we are recording a lot of investments in the sector of culture, and this is the case of Orange Cote d'Ivoire, where everything got digitalized. I mean, the Civilization Museum, and we also have group commitments in Cote d'Ivoire, like Sunu, which is well steeped in culture, and also Société Générale, which is a bank that we view as a unique case in Cote d'Ivoire. I'll go over that later. And you also have the youth. Our country has a large number of young people, and today, as part of the development and the training of the youngsters, we want to make it a priority. And we also intend to create quality jobs. Why? Because this is a sector that is ever-changing with a high potential. As you can see in this study by Ernst and Young, the GDP is 3% in Europe, 2% in South America, and 1% in Africa. And based on a report by the Finance General Inspectorate, the ICC accounts for 53 million euros and 2% of GDP, and offered jobs to about 253,000 people. And this is equal to the automobile and agricultural industry in France. In the Francophone Africa, if we go back to the pictures, the culture sector is characterized by a growing market, which is also impactful. It has a great economic development potentials in innovative areas, including entertainment, mood, gaming, and food. And in Cote d'Ivoire, this is a sector that has the very important features. It accounts for 2% of the GDP with a potential of 4% and creates 630,000 jobs. We have some issues related to data, and this is why we have rolled out a project with AVT to have more reliable figures on that sector, because this is a sector that is not known by many, but which is teeming with lots of opportunities. And this involves technical trades and jobs, calling for training to meet the needs. And we have a lot of women who are trooping in this sector. And once again, we need to mention that it's still in the informal sector, and it calls for support and to develop more touristic infrastructures so that we can create like museums, movie theaters. And today, this sector accounts for 140 billion of the turnover, and this shows that in terms of cultural infrastructure in the backcountry, we have a very great potential. And it's also a sector that is defined by a very large regulation, because today we have different laws, one on the national cultural policy, and another one by the Minister of Industry and SME, calling people to invest in the SME policy for cultural operators. We have one on movies, and we are currently putting together the law on music. And on that specific sector, we have custom and tax incentives, which are quite unique. When I joined office, I called for a study to be prepped, and it will be made available online on the website of the ministry. It's a benchmarking study to give a feel for the various tax incentives in countries like Senegal, Benin, and Morocco. And today I was very happy to see that the cultural sector has been factored in a very significant manner in those areas. And of course, this came out clearly. The cultural sector will build on a PPP partnership with the private sector, and opportunities are organized around 4 areas. First, we have investments in infrastructures. Today, we need to rehabilitate and set up new infrastructures backed by an extremely decentralized policy within the 14 districts. And we also have issues related to training and content. And today, the content in the face of the challenge of the digital challenge and AI call for our content to be reviewed in terms of training. And we also have the need to generate more content. This will not happen without training in all the sectors that have to do with content, and also the creative and industries. The same core is true. We need for a funding policy that's more adapted to our sector, and to this end, we are planning to develop more partnerships with microfinance institutions. And in Cote d'Ivoire, we already have Birenian, which has been supporting the cultural industry actors, and I believe this is something to be scaled up along with other guarantee mechanism in the financial sector. And of course, we also have upcoming major events such as the ASEAN, African Cup of Nations. We are placing our emphasis on major cultural events such as the park being built, and the Sahara platform. All of this call for spatial expertise and support in that sector. And we believe the cultural sector is a major driver in this regard. I will wind up with a practical case. So far, what has been done? I would like to hail the presence of Mr. Hubrin, who is the DG of Société Générale in Cote d'Ivoire. And the special case here is that at some point, Société Générale have become quite involved in contemporary arts, and it took a step to build contemporary museums, and various sites were explored, and the company got in touch with the Ministry of Culture and Francophonie, which made available a site in the historic city of Grand Bassam, which is part of the UNESCO heritage. We have availed of a spatial building facility, which is used by the Post and Telecommunication House, and this will be a project implemented under a partnership with the CNPP. I would like to thank its president, who is in this room. And under this process, we've been able to meet a number of needs. The government of Cote d'Ivoire was quite interested in constructing new facilities and buildings that will give more attractiveness to the city of Grand Bassam under this significant project. And the company will also go ahead and rehabilitate all the buildings that are now part of the heritage of UNESCO over a period of 18 months. And we have also availed of all the customs and tax exemptions that were made available to us. Sometimes we had to muscle through with the Minister of Budget to achieve our investments, and part of our investments will be exonerated of tax, and the same is true for the incoming products from outside, for the rehabilitation of the building, and this will be manned by an Ivorian architect. And we also wanted this building to be a feed school, so that the youngsters can also avail of this experience of rehabilitating such a unique facility. We have already laid the foundation stone, and this month we will undertake the effective inception of the construction works. We still have 2 additional speakers to come, and would like to go ahead with the Q&A.
You're not only investing in Cote d'Ivoire, but you're also, through the process, looking to attract other investors into the country. So tell us about that.
Yes, thank you, Asha. So first of all, Unirox is a company that was established in 1968 here in Abidjan, and it's a producer of the African textiles. And our main challenge to start with that is actually that a majority of the raw materials we need to produce our textiles are not available here in the Ivory Coast. But that challenge also is at the same time the opportunity that lies ahead of us, because as you know, the Ivory Coast is the third biggest producer of cotton. However, after the ginning process, there is a big gap in the value chain. So what we are doing together with our partners, our Asian partners, is to look at the opportunity of attracting spinners and weavers so that actually we don't need to anymore import our textiles and design and print our beautifully colored designs. So actually that is the main challenge for us, which also provides an opportunity for our partners, because we have to take into account that mostly in Asia, production costs are increasing, labor costs are increasing, and I think here in the Ivory Coast, as we have heard from the ministers and also of the Prime Minister this morning, there's a great development ongoing, and this is also one of the factors, of course, that plays a big role. The market, especially the textile and apparel market, is growing on an annual basis with 4 to 5% compound annual growth rate. So that already in itself is a big opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll come back to that. And last but not least, Olivier, let's come to you. Avec la SFI, tu es responsable.
The IFC, you are having a certain perspective in all these countries, and you are supporting the potential investors. So what is your pitch for about Cote d'Ivoire to these investors? How do you compare this country to other countries in the sub-region? Thank you, Archer. I think the one who's best placed for the pitch was the Prime Minister earlier on. So there's nothing to be added to that. Only some few items as add-ons. First of all, the Minister of Finance has clearly outlined the macroeconomic performance of Cote d'Ivoire, and in the current times, which is marked by the poly crisis, with significant impact on macroeconomic impact, productivity, and we're having a growth rate which is estimated at 6.5%, with a macroeconomic framework stable and inflation which is kept under 5%. I believe this is a performance that is envied by many countries, and it's important also for all of those who are here to stay, because they need to be sure that the investments will be secured. And the Prime Minister did not mention another evidence, which is the fact that Cote d'Ivoire is found in a monetary zone which is stable. It has been the case for 30 years now. And to address now the question, Asher, I don't think there's a need to mention the countries, but you can see the environment in which we are found, and we can also see the level of depreciation faced by investors. So these are the macroeconomic aspects that no longer need to be pitched, because such information are speaking from themselves. And second element, which was recalled earlier on, is the willpower of the Ivorian government. We have the National Development Plan to the tune of 65 billion, and 75% of this will originate from the private investments. But how do we come by that? I believe what shows the best that will is the ambitious reforms that which was discussed by the Prime Minister earlier on. Allow me to expand on 2 or 3 of them, which are quite symbolic. The Ministry of Construction, they has mentioned a gap of 600,000 houses, and the country has been fitted with an institutional infrastructure which will fit the needs of all the investors for the housing sector. We have been supporting the government to set up and structure a national agency for the habitat, and we also have a guarantee funds for the social habitat, And secondly, the Habitat Bank in Cote d'Ivoire has been also capitalized. So the purpose now is to work throughout all the housing value chain. Even prior to the construction phase, we will secure the site involving the land tenure and the need to address the tax incentives, and also downstream help the actors to achieve the objectives. And this is an ambitious reform, but the purpose behind it is to prompt the private sector to invest in the housing sector. Secondly, another ambitious move by the government, as it was earlier discussed by Jean-Louis, the need to deliver champions, including SMEs and SMIs. And the country has, of recent, introduced an institutional architecture in a form of single window, which is fitted with a guarantee funds for the SMEs. It's being capitalized thanks to the World Bank. And we are working to ensure that the SMEs, SMIs who are found in various promising value chains to get the capacity, because it's not enough to have funding. It also it takes the capacity to do the job. So those SMEs can turn to COFINA and Société Générale and other partners such as IFC, which is represented here in Cote d'Ivoire, to achieve their objectives. So, options are numberless, and this clearly translates what is happening on the ground. And I would like to wrap up with this issue of commercial or the trade court. The minister has mentioned this. It's a challenge. The government is at work, and we are trying to see how to fast-track the development of bank guarantees, because when we engage with the commercial banks, they mention that this is one of the hampers to loans to the SMEs, and we are at work with the Ministry of Justice along with the Prime Minister to see how we can have an accelerated guarantee process, and secondly, set up innovative mechanism to fund commercial justice. So the purpose behind this is to show that beyond the willpower and policy will, we have concrete actions taking place underground. And this is the message that we would like to put out to the investors and also to the IFC, which is present here. We also have our partner, the African Development Bank, which is headquartered here in Cote d'Ivoire. So Cote d'Ivoire is fully open to investors and entrepreneurs, as well as the funding institutions who are at our disposal. Big thanks, Olivier. And fortunate enough, we are going to wrap up this panel, and we hope that we've been able to convince all investors in attendance to not only come in to invest, but also to create and deliver champions at both domestic and international level. We thank all the panelists, and would like now to move on to the next phase of this meeting. I would also ask you to give it up for all the panelists. They deserve your applause. And thanks once again for this brilliant introduction. Africa can feel proud of its resources. Big thanks for such enticing presentation that we have received from each and every one of you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's good to mention that on the day one, good news are emerging. We have also to have the signing of MOUs. So the time for the organizers to set up everything. I just want to mention that the first signing of document will be the MOU on the construction of a cashew processing plant for 400,000 tons of cashew to the tune of $100 million for a rise from the private sector, represented by Mr. Gega Jupta, and for DJ Group, Mr. Deloitte Jane, and also for the government of Cote d'Ivoire, the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, and the Minister in charge of Trade and Industry, Mr. Kobina Kwasi Adjumani, and Mr. Suleiman Diasuba. Please give it up for our signers, or the signatories, sorry. And I'd like to recall that we are joined by the Prime Minister, who is here to participate in person in the signing of this MOU. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for that. So the two signatories, we have Mr. Arise and Mr. Jane Dorite for the DG Group. So the signing of the MOU on the construction of the cashew processing plant of 2,000 ton metrics capacity, and we have the government of Cote d'Ivoire, which is also a signatory to this. We are talking about 100 million US dollars. I think elsewhere this deserves a good round of applause. So now, time for the signing. In Cote d'Ivoire, there's this popular saying that goes as follows: money doesn't like noise. So let's avoid comments and just ask the table to put a background music to support this very important moment.
Je rappelle que nous assisterons à 3 signatures.
I'd like to recall that we have 3 signing events. The 2 others will follow through shortly.
To my fire. Baby, it's cold when you're gone. Don't make me wait too long. Whenever you're near, I have this feeling you're making me weak. To my fire. While you are my tempting delusion, you're melting it down.
Je veux rappeler qu'il s'agit de la signature.
Just to recall that this is about the signing of the MOU on the construction of the largest cashew plant in Cote d'Ivoire. So this calls for a round of applause.
Après les signatures, on va assister donc à l'échange.
And following the signing of the MOU, we now see the exchange of folders. Dear Prime Minister, of course, you are going to be a part of this historic picture. Honorable Minister of Economy and Finance, Planning and Development, dear MD of the cashew sector, Mr. Amadou Sangafwa Kone, you can be a part of this picture as well. Honorable Minister, Minister of Culture and Tourism, members of the government in the room, please be a part of this photo, even though you will be participating in other signing events. This will be the largest cashew processing unit in the world. Its MOU is being signed today on the occasion of this ACF. I think it's a big achievement. It's a giant step. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. For the second round of signing, I just want to recall that this is an MOU on the integrated development of a plantain farm over a total area of 900, bringing together 120 farmers, and this will help to export plantain to China to the tune of 120 million CFA. And Mr. Yakuba Kone is behind this project for the side of Cote d'Ivoire. And for the side of Cote d'Ivoire, the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development is rather the Minister Adjumani.
Troisième signature.
The third round of the signing of MOUs is on the MOU between Cote d'Ivoire and the company SSE to build a facility which will host the Ivorian Media Agency to the tune of 180 million euros. For the side of ICC, we have Mr. Omar, and for the government of Cote d'Ivoire, you have the Minister for Construction and the Minister of Tourism. Dear Prime Minister, for the second group photo, be a part of it.
On va applaudir ces moments, s'il vous plaît.
Please give it up for them. Thank you. The third round of signing of MOU, we would like to ask over Mr. Omar El Mer-Ebi and Mr. Sambou Fofana from the Ministry of Construction in the person of Mr. Bruno Nabanye to sign an MOU to the tune of 285 million euros.
Voilà. Cette photo de famille.
Right, so this group photo will bring us to the end of to the end of this section of the meeting, and also allow for the head of a government who has a very busy schedule to take a leave of us. Please give it up for the Prime Minister, Patrice Achi, who stayed with us so far.
Et faire également des ovations pour Monsieur le Président du CNC.
Shall we also give a round of applause to the President of the Private and Public Partnership Committee?
Après ces signatures, nous allons entendre l'ultime mot.
And following this signing section, we'll have another intervention by the Minister Diarasuba on behalf of the Prime Minister, and that intervention will bring us to the end of this beautiful event. I can see that we have a number of people on their feet in the room. Please resume your seats for those who are still on their feet.
Voilà, on a fini avec les signatures. Place, on va quand même faire une photo, même si vous avez...
Okay, let's thank our various panelists. And please, now let's get prepared for the intervention by the Minister Suleiman Jarasuba, Minister for Trade and Industry of Cote d'Ivoire, for the closing remarks of this meeting.
Bien, mesdames et messieurs les...
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable ministers, dear business leaders and CEOs, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to rise before you on behalf of the Prime Minister, His Excellency Patrick Achi, head of the government, on the occasion of this closing ceremony of the side event on investing in Cote d'Ivoire. And this brings us at the end of this important session, which was focused on the dialogue between the public decision makers and business leaders on the topic of challenges on the transformation of the Ivorian economy and opportunities for the private sector. I would like to extend the deep gratitude of the Prime Minister, His Excellency Patrick Achi, as well as that of Cote d'Ivoire, to all of those who have contributed to a certain extent to the successful staging of this event on investing in Cote d'Ivoire. And I also want to laud the organizers for this smooth organizing of this side event, and also to all the participants in this important meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the Prime Minister has clearly outlined the landscape, discussing the vision of the President of the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire, His Excellency Alassane Ouattara, of whose leadership is well recognized at both national and international level, a person with a clear vision for his country. And it is in this regard that he came up with the Cote d'Ivoire Solidaire Ambition, of which strategic framework was discussed by the Prime Minister, intended to first lower poverty level and create additional 8 million jobs for the young and women. In this regard, Cote d'Ivoire has developed a strategy called the National Development Plan for 2021-2025, and this is the third generation, because the first one was to the tune of 11 billion CFA, and that of today, which is the third one, is in the tune of 59 billion CFA. That is 90 million euros. And the government of Cote d'Ivoire, for the implementation of this and also to attract more investors, had to undertake different reforms over the last decades, as well as a number of investments across the boards. This includes the socio-economic infrastructures, highways, ports, and energy, and a great deal of investment in the human capital. And all of this has affected the dynamic of our economy. The Minister of Finance and Economy has recalled that earlier on in terms of how strong is our macroeconomic framework, and also the dynamics that is displayed at the multi-sectoral level in all the business segments. And this means for us to come up with concrete results. Firstly, in the key cluster, which is agri-business. You are all aware that Cote d'Ivoire is the world leading producer with 2.2 million tons per annum. And also Cote d'Ivoire today stands as the world leading broiler of cocoa, which is processed at the domestic level. I think this calls for a round of applause. It also shows all the reforms undertaken to attract more investors, to boost and ignite such capacities. And this is also an illustration of what we have seen in terms of progress. In 2017, cashew processing stood at 6%, but in 2020, we shifted to 22%, with the ambition to reach 53% over the next years. And Cote d'Ivoire has also introduced a number of reforms to secure investments and reassure the investors through the establishment of the trade court and tribunal and arbitration, as well as a great deal and gamut of arrangements to boost investments, because the end goal is to change the paradigm for the benefit of the private sector. This will generate more revenue and income. And this cannot happen if the private sector is not strong enough and dynamic to allow for the creation of thousands of jobs and support the government in the execution of its legal role. And this shows that our country is the strategic and dynamic and proactive government which supports the private sector. And this is talk legs of the B2Bs that will be held on the sidelines of this event. I'm sure that win-win partnerships will fall out of this between business leaders from elsewhere and those from this country via joint ventures, so that together they can support Cote d'Ivoire in the process of achieving its ambitions, that is to turn our country into a country that is accepted in the mid-income countries. So at this stage and juncture, I would like to thank you for your input and also mention that Cote d'Ivoire is calling on you, and based on all the studies that have been made, we have observed that in terms of internal profitability rate or in terms of investments, the indicators stand generally above the levels generally accepted. This is a way to say that when you invest in Cote d'Ivoire, you stand the chance of getting the return on investments. And today, the trade level stands at 21 billion CFA, which is up by 21% as against 2021. And we trust in the dynamic of African Union, and the intra-African trade by Cote d'Ivoire is beyond the minimum level of 16%. And all of this shows that opportunities are numerous, and you could hear that via the institutional motion picture by CPC and the very enticing intervention by the panelists who are stakeholders that have trusted in our country for some years now. Thank you and welcome to Cote d'Ivoire for your investments. So on behalf of the Prime Minister, I declare close the side event on investing in Cote d'Ivoire. Big thanks. Thank you, dear Minister, and thank you to each and every one of you. And I wish you to enjoy your meal and see you soon.